Hello, everyone. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about this concept of creating your own creating your own business strategies, unique ones that actually stand out. Okay, so here's the thing, right? Um, in in our lives, right? In our lives, in our businesses, there's constantly people who are, first of all, telling us what to do. So there's that side of it. And it's really overwhelming. And it's like, well, which ones do I do? And then there's the other side of it, of the people who are all like, do your own thing, which is great, except for the fact that how do you just do your own thing? How do you just create your own strategy, create your own routine, create your own business when there's no precedence for it, right? Like, how do you do that? Precedent. I don't know. I don't know if I said that word right. Whatever. I'm trying. um, so the big question people tend to have is like, yes, I would love to create my own strategies and create my own business and my own life and all that fun stuff. But it's really hard to do that because there's no how to for that, apparently. Um, and here's the reality of it, right? There's never going to be a how to. Like, even this podcast or this video, if you're watching it on YouTube, by the way, if you are listening to the podcast and you want to check out the YouTube channel, don't forget to go to the show notes. But if if you were coming to this expecting for a very specific how to, that's not what's going to happen here. Um, but what I do want to talk about are ways that you can start to create your own strategies and your own business. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about your own marketing strategies. That's not just based in post 4 times a week and all this other standard stuff people tell you to do. So, what we're going to do first is we're going to talk a little bit about why it's important to do your own thing and to go through this process of creating your own strategies and your own methods and your own way of doing things. And then also a little bit of how you can go about doing that. And it is not easy. No one ever said it was easy. And part of the reason why it's not easy is because there really aren't any steps for it. If there were steps, that wouldn't make much sense because it's all about doing your own things. So it really doesn't make much sense. But yeah, let's start talking a little bit about why this is important, right? Um, and if you are the kind of person who is happy to jump on a bandwagon and just follow it through and you're content with whatever you can get through that path, great, fine. That is fantastic. That is you. Go ahead and do that. But if you kind of were wanting to do something bigger, if you were thinking you were starting something new, maybe, or even if you're looking around at all of these strategies and none of them seem to sit well with you. And it can be any of them. Like, you could look at every single one out there and you can be like, none of them seem to sit well with me. So what do I do? Whatever that might be. What tends to happen is we, you know, especially because entrepreneurship has become pretty big, especially in the last year and the last few years for sure. It's no longer the huge leap it used to be. Like, it used to be such a big deal because there was, very little precedent for it. Again, there's very little precedent for it, not that many success stories. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, well, if you want to try and do that, mind you, obviously starting your own business has been a thing that's been around for a long time, especially in the US and certainly other places. um, and that concept's been around for a while, but um, in terms of like building your own online business and stuff, which is what a lot of us are trying to do, that's still relatively new and that's still kind of a weird thing. But because it's become a lot more popular recently, now there are so many success stories. So it's not a big deal to make the leap into online entrepreneurship anymore. Maybe in your mind it might feel like it, and that's, it's great that you took the leap in that sense. But really, all we've done at this point, especially if you're just starting out and you're starting to listen to other people and all of that, all we've done at this point is jump on a bandwagon. It's a trend, it's a fad. Um, a lot of people are doing it now. Um, I'm a huge proponent of being like, yes, like, be proud of yourself and all of that, but also understand the reality of, like, don't trick yourself into thinking that you're doing some huge monumental thing that no one else ever did, because there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us out there, and that is a good thing because it means there's a lot of community. So that's actually a good thing, please. Please. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, and I'm not putting you down. I just want to put the reality of that out there. So why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning this because entrepreneurship has become something of a bandwagon. I've mentioned that term a few times. And because of that, we end up just hopping on whatever bandwagon is thrown in front of us at that current moment. So that could be the whole Amazon FBA thing that a lot of people are doing and have seen ads for. That could be copywriting. You could be jumping on, like, whatever famous copywriter is teaching you, such and such strategy, whatever coach is teaching you such and such strategy, the VA, influx that happened because of TikTok. All of this stuff is just jumping on a bandwagon. And that's okay, especially when you're just getting your footing. It's usually an easy way to kind of find community and like start figuring out what you're doing. But at some point, you're you're probably going to come to a point where you kind of have to make some big decisions. Um, and often that decision is, do I continue on the bandwagon? Which is, again, fine. It just kind of becomes a little more akin to a 9 to 5, and that you're listening to what someone else is doing, and whether it works for you, like the strategy feels good to you or not. Maybe it feels comfortable. Maybe that's where you're comfortable rather than a 9 to 5. That's fine. That's great. Like, honestly, I am not putting that down. Please go ahead and do that. But what ends up happening to a lot of people, and this is why you've probably seen so many VAs maybe coming in, or even coaches, and then they just disappear off the face of the earth. Like, they basically gave up, right? Um, what usually happens is there comes a point where you're just like, why am I doing this? Like, this was so exciting before. It's, first of all, not as easy as I thought it was. It never is. Some people stumble into it just the right time, have just the right connections, all that good stuff. It's not luck. They just were, they had that. Um, and that's good for them. But for a lot of us, that's not the case. And it's a very long journey. Um, so keeping that in mind, so it's not as easy as they thought it was. Um, yeah, just even more difficulty, just constant difficulty, not even just the ease of like, oh, but like, having other things going on in your life and something comes up and that'll cause you to stop. And then there's the other piece of like, do I even like this? And this happens a lot. People will run into this crossroad of being like, do I even like what I'm doing? Because a lot of people get into this world because of those big promises of flexibility and freedom, being able to travel and work, being able to, set your own schedule, like all of that great stuff. They come into the world because of that and not because of the job description. um, and that's the funny thing. Oh, wow, my voice just totally cracked. But that's kind of the funny thing about this whole thing. I wouldn't say funny. But people come to a point where sometimes they realize, wait a minute, this particular job maybe isn't what I wanted to do. Like, I didn't want to do this thing. And it's happened to a lot of VAs who came into the VA world, especially those virtual assistants who came into that world. And because they were like, oh, well, I can do admin work, I can do that. And they realized they didn't really want to. And some of them gave up. And that's completely fine. Like, some giving up isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's realizing what you don't want, and that's fine. The point of all of this is that when you get to that point, um, when you get to that really difficult point where you have to kind of make that decision, you're going to find there are a bunch of people who decide to stay on the bandwagon because they're like, well, I still want to make this work, and I'm going to make it work in a way that's already worked for other people because it's easy. It's easy to do it that way, or it feels easy to do it that way. And for some people it works, and for some people it still doesn't quite sit with them. And then there's the other side of people who just realize it doesn't really sit with them, and there's something else they actually wanted to do, but it's scarier because maybe there's no precedent for it. Or maybe there's very little precedent for it, or something like that. So I can give from personal experience as someone who started out as a copywriter, VA, whatever. And I kept seeing all these coaches, and I was like, wow, I would love to teach people things for a living, basically, to guide people for a living. Oh, that'd be great. I basically just talk to people for a living, to be honest. At least that's what it felt like at the time. And I remember I got my first business coach, and we kind of talked about it, and I was like, I think I'm just going to go into coaching. I mean, I don't even really want to do all this SEO bullshit. Which I did for a little bit after that, just because it was getting money. But But I very quickly realized that first of all, the coaching industry was a lot harder, which was to be expected, but it was more fulfilling for me. So it would have been quite easy for me to continue on in the copywriting and VA and SEO and website, whatever realm. Um, it just was, it wasn't my thing. Um, and I realized I would have been quite unhappy with it. And I think there's a lot of people out there that can kind of resonate with that, being like, well, this particular thing I'm doing is starting to work, um, or it could work, but I don't know if I want to do it. And if that sounds like you, then this is probably that crossroad you're at of being like, should I keep going on the bandwagon, following this, like doing all the things that people have told me to do? Or should I veer off at my own path? And that's scary and terrifying, especially when there's little precedent for it, or like, you know, maybe you feel like you're just not ready for it. It is a lot scarier, it seems a lot harder, all of that great and wonderful stuff. Anyway, again, point of all of that being, kind of tying back into this whole, why is it important to come up with your own strategies and your own your own thing. um, it's important because of that decision making and that crossroad, because the moment you decided you wanted to start your own business was the moment you kind of already made that choice to go down that path. But naturally, you're faced with more decisions similar to that. You think that's the only decision you have to make, but it's not true. there's more, and they get progressively more difficult and riskier. It's just the reality of it. This is just how it works, right? Some people thrive in that risk. You see a lot, there's a lot of people out there you see who love it. Like they love the challenge, they love the risk, they're just totally present and out there. And those people, great, awesome. That's not all of us. And that's okay. That is okay. So when you made this decision to start your business, you already kind of veered off and you made that choice to kind of follow your own path. Now you're being faced probably with another decision, and we all run into it at some point of, do I keep doing the thing that maybe doesn't sit well with me? Or do I maybe try something else? um, and what ends up happening most of the time is people think they try something else and then they end up falling back on the other path. They're like, never mind. That's usually what ends up happening, because the reality of following the path of doing your own thing, whether that's in a strategy, a method, whether it's in a routine, whether it's in a career path, whatever that is sometimes it's easier to actually start it than it is to keep going. And that, again, always the case. You really kind of need patience. So when you're actually coming up with your own strategies and your own methods, so I'm just going to start with your own strategies first, right? Because that's kind of the big one that comes up. Marketing strategies, that's a really big one where people are like, do I have to reach out to people in the DMs, for example? Do I have to make those, posts in Facebook groups? Do I have to post every single day? Like, do I have to do all of this stuff? Have to is always a loaded word, by the way. It kind of depends on the result you sort of want out of it. Um, but I also think that the energy you put into it does play a part. And logically, that is the case. So let me just explain that. So let's just take, for example, do I have to DM people? Do I have to just directly DM people who follow me or DM possible leads? Um, what if I don't want to do that? Um, and one of the big things people often tell you is being like, oh, you just got to find a way to do it in a way you like, which I kind of agree with, simply because it is true. But sometimes finding a way to do it in a way you like is difficult, right? You're kind of like, okay, like I would love to do that. I would love to find a way to like this, but I don't. Um, so for me, sometimes I just have to sit down and be like, okay, what start, surface level, what matters to me? What do I actually like to do? I like creating. I like creating content, videos, pictures, or whatever. That is just fun to me. I like writing. I like making these podcasts. All of that is fun to me. Okay, so I like that. What else matters to me? Well, I do enjoy making new friends, like actual new friends. I do enjoy talking to people about something that matters. I do enjoy talking about big ideas and visions and stuff. Like I love talking about like how I'm gonna one day down the line run a convention. Um, and I like hearing what other people want out of this. So thinking about kind of, and I also like storytelling. That's another thing. I also really like storytelling. And I like kind of building a community of people who want to do something fun, like do wine nights and stuff like that. So knowing all of that, knowing the things that matter to me and the things that I like, I also like dressing up as Jack Sparrow and like all the other fun stuff. I can kind of, for me at least, I can kind of use that to be like, okay, well, how do I normally make friends with people? How do I normally start talking to people? And I think, okay, usually it's when I'm in like, I'm playing tennis and I'm talking to the people who are playing tennis with me. Um, or I'm waiting in line for something and I'm talking to someone about that. Or, I'm at a convention dressed up as Jack Sparrow and I talk to another Jack Sparrow. So for me, what I ended up doing was being like, okay, if that's how I usually make friends, maybe that's how I would do it here. I usually just start interesting conversations with people based on something that I already like. So what I've done now, rather than just reaching out to random people, is I kind of go through people's stories, sometimes their posts or whatever, as I'm just scrolling through stories casually. I'll usually run into something that intrigues me. Maybe it's something that they've shared that I also believe in, or maybe it's like they post about tea and I'm a huge tea fan. I'm like, oh my God, tea. Or they post about wine. I'm a huge wine fan. And I do that. And we talk about that. No, that's not business related right now. But for me, that's how I start my conversations with people and that's how I continue them. And so at some point I usually get people to talk about like their dreams and their visions because I think that's so much fun to talk about as opposed to small talk. I'm just like, oh my God, like I want to run a convention 5 years down the line. Like, what do you want to do in 5 years? Would love to hear because I love hearing where people want to go. Um, so keeping all of that in mind, um, I want you to think about what, if you're struggling to come up with strategies and whatever that works for you, the most important thing to think about is what matters to you. Is it really is like, what do you value a lot? Like, not something you value, but you sometimes set to the side. Like, what do you really value? What really matters to you? And what are things that you just like? What are things you like to do? What are things you like to hear? Whatever that is, and you have to kind of mess around with that and use that to kind of dictate some of your strategies. So for me as well, because I like those like fun, authentic community building stuff, I now have a wine night thing, a wine night chat with some friends in the community. We just started doing it and it's fun. And it's not business related, but we're all business owners. Um, and we do like, we drink wine and I do my drunk oracle pulls and it's fun. But that's something that matters to me, right? Um, and you can kind of use a lot of this stuff to just kind of start to think about, well, how can I input this into what I'm doing? And the reason why this works and it's important is because it makes you more likely to keep up with it. It makes you have more fun with it. Suddenly these, DM conversations aren't such a chore. Um, and yes, there is some strategy to a lot of this stuff that would work better in some sense, or maybe work quicker. So if you're trying to get somewhere quicker or faster, yeah, maybe you follow the bandwagon. But ultimately, I have a goal I want that isn't all about getting there quickly. Um, like I still want this, even if I don't get there quickly. So I'd much rather take the time to figure out a way to do it that I actually enjoy, that doesn't burn me out, so that I don't hate my life. Right? Um, so that's true for anything. So that's true. Like if you find, and this is same for me, like I ended up finding I'm like, I just don't like Facebook groups. I really don't. And I go in there and respond to people's stuff occasionally just because I can. And it pops up on my feed all the time because it's Facebook algorithm. But I don't I just don't do all the posting in there to get people to come to my events or what. It doesn't work anymore. I hate it personally. I'm just not a fan. I don't like all the people in Facebook groups usually. That's just me personally. Um, you know, and that's just kind of like whatever works for you and whatever matters to you. And I know that's such like a vague thing to say, but you really have to sit there with yourself and reflect on the things you actually like and value and what matters to you and how, like sit there and be like, well, how can I use this? You have to get creative. You have to think outside the box and you have to try things out and see if it works. And it might not work, but you won't know until you try it. And who knows, if it does start working, you could be the first person to create a strategy that other people jump on the bandwagon of. We all would love to be that person, right? And it takes trial and error. Like, no one came up with these strategies just by, like, snapping their fingers. Like, trial and error is the reality of it. So kind of a recap of all of this. Um, I want you guys to understand that there is that decision between continuing on the bandwagon, completely quitting, and going your own path. And you can make whatever decision that you see fit. But if you're listening to this and you had wanted to start doing your own thing in some way, and that could be strategies, and that can also be in your own business, there are ways to do it, and you can do it in a way that feels good for you. It's not always, by the way, going to feel 100% great for you. You can't just constantly be temperature checking yourself and only doing things that feel good on any given day. That's the reality. But you can still do something that overall, in the long term, gets you satisfaction and fulfillment. And that's what you should be thinking about, right? It's not my feelings in the current moment necessarily all the time, but it's what's going to get me long term satisfaction. And that's really important. And that's why I like talking about visions and goals. Um, anyway, this was kind of a quick talk, but I just wanted to make sure that that was really out there. I know it's difficult to come up with your own strategies in your own way. And I know it's tough. That's why you talk to people. That's why you have friends and mentors and guides and coaches and all of these people that you can talk through these things with, who have another perspective that maybe you didn't even know or didn't even see, or maybe, have information that you didn't have. And that's the best part about this community, is being able to talk to these people and seeing things in a way that maybe you didn't see, especially if you're feeling stuck. That is the most helpful thing you can have. Um, that said, that is kind of what I'm doing in my mastermind. I'm helping people figure out a way that works for them. Um, I'm helping people figure out strategies that work for them and reevaluating them and seeing what's actually working and making sure that we are really doing what we want to be doing, but also pushing ourselves to be the best us and pushing ourselves to do things that scare us, because, you know, getting uncomfortable is part of this business, and it's an important part, and you'll be thankful you did. So if you're interested in joining the mastermind, I do have some spots open, and prices are going to be going up in June. So if you're listening to this before June of 2021, then you're in luck. Make sure to DM me at The Authentic Domi, or email me at info@domicat.com. All this info should be in the show notes. Let me know if you have any questions at all. And I am super excited to hear from you. Thank you guys so much. And I will talk to you later. Bye.